Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, Sir Michael Wilshaw has been Chief Inspector of English schools under successive education secretaries. He's never slow to speak his mind, has been sharply critical of Theresa May's plans for more grammar schools. As he prepares to leave, he argues that if we're going to make a success of Brexit, we need an education revolution. Welcome, Sir Michael. First of all, before we get on to that, just before we start, as you look back over your time, what is your conclusion now about the state of English school education?
Well, we've got a better English education system now than we've ever had. Our system was in special measures, in intensive care in the 70s, 80s and much of the 90s, but the reforms that have taken place to governance, restructure, academies, free schools, a better curriculum and assessment, certainly a tougher curriculum and assessment systems, have made a big difference. And we've got a much better education system now, better literacy and numeracy levels in primary schools. 6 in 10 youngsters get the top GCSEs. 20 years ago, it was less than 1 in 5.
That is a solid achievement, but I sense a but coming.
Well, the big but is that if we're not there yet, we're not with the best jurisdictions in the world. We're not there with the South Koreas and the Shanghais and some of the really good European nations, and we've got a lot to do to catch up. We've got to sort out the big regional differences in performance in our country, particularly at secondary level, particularly in the Midlands and the North, and we've got to do something about skills.
So how would you sum it up in a word?
It's 6.5 out of 10.
Mediocre.
Mediocre but getting better.
Mediocre but getting better. You've said about the poorest children that as you begin your last few months as Chief Inspector, it saddens me immeasurably to say frankly that we're still letting down our poorest children and that if things do not change fundamentally, we will continue to do so. What would fundamental change mean to help the poorest?
Well, the long tail of underachievement, which contains the poorest children in the main, is one of the longest in the OECD. And if we're going to become one of the top nations in the world, we've got to do something about that. And there's no magic bullet to this, but a lot of the poorest children are in those white working class communities and the rural areas and isolated communities and the coastal resorts. We've got to crack that one. It's not simple, but we need to get the best teachers and we need to get the best leaders into those communities and show that they can make a difference. That is not happening at a rate that it should.
Wouldn't more grammar schools, choice by selection rather than by house price, as the Prime Minister has put it, help some of those children?
Well, if I thought grammar schools were going to make a difference, I'd be here saying so and I'd be waving the flag for grammar schools. I don't think it would. We've moved on from... We mustn't be misty-eyed and nostalgic about the 50s, when a small number of youngsters did very well and 80% of the youngsters more did badly.
So for
our economy now needs more highly skilled, better educated people than ever before.
So for people watching who don't quite get the argument, what is the strongest case against grammar schools?
Well, if you have grammar schools, you take away the most able children from the all-ability comprehensive setup. And I speak as an ex-head of a successful inner-city comprehensive school, an academy in Hackney. I needed those top 20% to lift everyone up. And it was my ambition to get 70, 80, 90% of youngsters through their GCSEs. I wouldn't have been able to do it if those youngsters, those top, the most able youngsters, went to the grammar school, because it was their ambition, their excellence that affected the rest of the school community.
So there's no way in which an expansion of grammar schools can't help but damage schools around them.
Absolutely, and that's the point that I'm making. And we need now many more youngsters in the sort of economy, the service-led, knowledge economy, digital economy that we've now got to do well academically.
So on grammar schools, what's your message to Theresa May and
Well,
Justin Greening?
I would not focus on grammar schools. I would focus on education and skills. It is the real Cinderella service of the education system. And with Brexit, we need many more skilled young youngsters to go into the jobs in Sunderland and elsewhere.
So we come to the heart of the argument, really, which is you say we need an education revolution to produce much more technical skills training in this country. We used to have polytechnics all around the country. They've become universities. Was that a mistake?
I think it was a mistake. We need a skills revolution in this country. I'm a big supporter of what Lord Baker, Ken Baker's tried to do with the university technology colleges, the 14 to 19 technology colleges. It got off to a shaky start, but I think the principle is absolutely right. If you look at what's happened in Germany and in Switzerland and in other European countries, they've got it absolutely right. And the reason they've got it absolutely right is that there's a political focus on it in a way that there hasn't been over the last half century here. And we've got to have that political focus, and we've got to bang heads together, employers, colleges and schools.
And you have to persuade politicians as well, because there is no great drive for this at the moment. As you leave your current job, are you going to commit, I know, I'm sure you've got retirement plans and all sorts of things, but are you going to commit yourself to helping drive for a new generation of technical colleges and technical universities?
Yes, I am, and I'm going to join that movement because it's the much needed reform that's needed in our country. It's a big gaping hole in our education system that needs to be filled. And Brexit won't be a success unless we have more homegrown talent coming through.
And if we don't do this, and we don't have the migrants coming in from the rest of the EU, what happens to us?
Well, I'll tell you what happens. We've just done a survey of 500 major employers in the country. Two-thirds of them said that the skills shortage is getting much worse, and that's going to carry on unless we give it more time and attention and not focus on the top 10%, focus on the great majority and those who need more skills.
You have served under 3 different Secretaries of State for Education. You've been outspoken, as I said at the beginning. Michael Gove has been the one who's been, in a sense, the most radical, determined to change things, charging in, a man of ideas, highly controversial. How do you rate him as an Education Secretary?
Well, he'll go down as one of the great Secretaries of State for Education. I had some rows with him, which were well publicised, but I was broadly on the same page as he was. It needed radical reform, greater autonomy for people on the front line, a reform of the curriculum which was wishy-washy and not robust enough, reform of the examination system. He was a good Secretary of State.
And he fought the blob, the education establishment. Do you recognise the blob?
Yeah, I've recognised it, and I fought them as well. A blob which is resistant to change. I wouldn't call it the blob, but people who are resistant to change and reform. You've got to challenge and fight, and I think I've done that at Ofsted.
Sir Michael Wilshaw, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
I've been getting away with it all